Okay, so get this. We're diving into a story that honestly sounds more like a movie plot than actual history.
Oh, yeah.
A sitting vice president challenges a former Treasury secretary to a duel.
Whoa.
Yeah, hard to believe, right? But this is exactly what went down in the early days of American politics. I mean, think about it. Power struggles were intense back then. Personal rivalries could actually have deadly consequences.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting about this particular duel, this one between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton? It really shows just how fragile a young nation can be. Grappling with internal divisions and the ambitions of these, well, powerful men.
It's true, and the sources we've got for this deep dive are really incredible. There's this American History Tellers podcast episode that's just packed with details. And so I guess our mission here, if you want to call it that, is to try to understand Aaron Burr.
Well, he's a figure often shrouded in so much mystery, right?
Yeah,
And controversy.
exactly. How does someone go from a war hero and a rising political star to, well, a potential traitor?
It's a wild story. And the sources do paint a vivid picture of his early life, which is full of both privilege and tragedy. Born into a prestigious family, he loses both his parents at a young age.
That's rough.
But despite these setbacks, right,
Yeah,
he rises through the ranks. He was very intelligent, very charming.
it's true. Revolutionary War hero, successful lawyer, even crosses paths with Alexander Hamilton very early on in their careers.
Almost as if their lives were, what, destined to intertwine, even if it ultimately led to conflict.
Yeah, like some Shakespearean drama.
Yeah, exactly. And their contrasting personalities definitely add another layer to this whole story. I mean, Burr was so reserved and strategic, always thinking long term.
Mm.
Hamilton, well, brilliant, obviously, but also impulsive, often letting his emotions kind of guide his actions.
Ah, I see. So this clash of styles, this is what sets the stage for their eventual showdown.
It's like watching a political thriller unfold in real time, isn't it?
It really is. And then, oh man, then you've got the election of 1800.
Oh, yeah, total nail biter.
A tie between Thomas Jefferson and, well, you guessed it, Aaron Burr.
Can you imagine the chaos that caused?
I can't even imagine.
It was such a pivotal moment. And Burr's refusal to concede, I mean, even to the leader of his own party, it reveals a key aspect of his character, don't you think? This ambition that just seemed to surpass all other considerations.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, was he really committed to these Republican ideals, or was he just driven by the pursuit of power?
Right.
It's the question.
It's tough to tell. He was a bit of an enigma, it seems, even to his own allies.
Right.
The sources suggest that while, yeah, he was aligned with the Republicans, he kind of played both sides,
Oh, interesting.
which makes him a hard guy to trust.
Totally. And this distrust would only deepen after the Louisiana Purchase.
Right. Jefferson scores this huge victory, acquires this vast territory. It doubles the size of the United States.
I mean, can you imagine? You think that would maybe satisfy anyone's ambition? But not Burr's. He's overshadowed.
Pushed him to seek new avenues for power.
Right. Which brings us to his campaign for the governorship of New York.
Yes, and this is where things take a turn, a darker turn. He's attracting support from, well, they were known as secessionists.
Secessionists.
Yeah, and to understand how radical that was, you have to remember that this is, only a few decades after the American Revolution?
Right.
These guys, they believe in breaking up the United States. I mean,
Right.
that's a concept that is just deeply unsettling to many at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that the nation was facing these internal threats so soon after they, declared independence.
I know, right? And it really raises an important question. Was Burr truly aligned with these guys, or was he just using them as a stepping stone to regain power? What do you think?
That's a tough one. What we do know is that Alexander Hamilton, he certainly believed the worst of Burr.
Oh, for sure. He campaigned so hard against him, even accused him of treason.
Treason, wow.
It's clear from the sources that Hamilton, he really loathed Burr. I mean, he saw Burr as a threat to the very fabric of the nation that, he had helped create.
Their rivalry had reached a fever pitch, to say the least.
That's a good way to put it.
And then, well, this brings us to the duel itself. And it was triggered by, get this, a newspaper article quoting Hamilton's not-so-flattering opinion of Burr.
Oh, man. Talk about adding fuel to the fire. But, it's important to understand dueling back then, the culture of it all.
Yeah, tell me that.
Okay, so it wasn't just about violence. It was this whole formalized ritual, all about honor and reputation, your social standing.
So, like, to refuse a duel would be to risk losing your place in society.
Exactly.
But the consequences were very real.
And often deadly.
The sources describe the whole etiquette of choosing weapons, the pacing off the distance. Like, it's all so carefully choreographed.
Right.
But it can lead to these potentially fatal outcomes.
And in this case, well, the outcome was tragic. The sources depict the duel in such detail, it's chilling. The early morning setting, the tension, you can feel it, the gunfire, and then Hamilton's fatal wound.
Wow. The aftermath of that duel must have been shocking for the whole nation. And for Burr, well, it marked the beginning of a desperate flight from justice.
Absolutely. He became a fugitive. I mean, think about this. He fled to Philadelphia to avoid murder charges.
From war hero to a fugitive, accused murderer. Talk about a fall from grace. But you know what really struck me? There's this conversation he has with a friend after the duel.
Oh, really?
He seems defiant, like he's hinting that he's not finished yet. He's still got plans in motion. It's like, even while facing these serious consequences, his ambition is just burning as brightly as ever.
You're so right. And that ambition, now mixed with a good dose of desperation, well, that's going to lead Burr down a path of, let's say, intrigue.
Oh, I bet.
And potential treason as he sets his sights on the vast, untamed West. But we'll dive into that fascinating chapter of the story, well, later.
Okay, so last we heard, Burr's a fugitive hiding out in Philadelphia after the duel. It's kind of a lot to process, the sitting vice president running from the law.
I know, right? And the thing that's really striking is, he just doesn't seem to be all that sorry for what happened.
Yeah, you're right. The sources really emphasize that. Like, he's convinced he acted honorably, defending his reputation.
He even claimed that Hamilton actually meant to kill him.
Really?
Yeah, he pointed to the fact that that Hamilton put on his glasses before aiming.
Huh. So, like, he was thinking, oh, got to make sure I get a clear shot.
Yeah, basically suggesting premeditation.
That is chilling. But, I mean, was it actually cold-blooded intent or just, wanting to see clearly? It's hard to know for sure.
Exactly. It's one of those moments where, we have these accounts from both sides, both trying to justify what happened.
And we're left trying to sift through it all.
Yeah, trying to figure out the truth, amidst these conflicting narratives.
It's a mess. But one thing's for sure, the duel completely destroyed Burr's political chances back east.
For sure. Reputation in ruins, potential prosecution.
So he turns his attention westward to this vast Louisiana territory.
And this is where the story gets kind of cinematic, right? Like, you've got Burr, the fallen politician, venturing into this wild frontier, a land full of both opportunity and danger.
Yeah, and it's not like he's just looking for a quiet life out in the West.
Yeah.
The sources talk about him meeting with, well, some pretty important people, like General James Wilkinson.
Oh, wow. The head of the U.S. Army. That's quite a connection for someone on the run.
Right. And Wilkinson's a pretty interesting character himself. He's described as, like, flamboyant, ambitious.
Sounds like he had his own beef with the Jefferson administration.
Oh, yeah. And now they're huddled together, poring over maps of Spanish territories, whispering about alliances and, wait for it, secession.
Sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It really does. And, we don't know exactly what went on in those secret meetings, but it's obvious that Burr wasn't just fading into the sunset out west. He was cooking up a plan.
And it definitely involved taking advantage of, the tension between the U.S. and Spain.
Yeah, remember, this is a time when the borders of the country are still pretty fluid. Allegiances are shifting all the time. The idea of a separate Western nation, maybe even allied with Spain, it wasn't totally crazy.
And this is where the question of treason comes in. There's this shocking proposition in the sources, like Burr allegedly offers his services to the British.
No way.
Yeah, promises to help them break up the United States.
Whoa, that's a huge betrayal, especially considering his whole role in the fight for independence. What could have possibly driven him to that? Just pure ambition, revenge against everyone who turned on him, or something else entirely.
This is one of those places where the sources leave us with more questions than answers. Was he a true believer in this idea of Western independence, or was he just an opportunist using the whole situation to get back on top?
I don't know. It's hard to reconcile the war hero image with this guy who's, potentially scheming to bring the whole country down.
And then there's Wilkinson. What about his role in all of this?
Whoa.
Willing accomplice or something else?
Yeah, we got to remember, Wilkinson was a paid Spanish spy. Talk about adding another layer of intrigue.
Right. So while Burr's busy making plans and forming alliances, he's surrounded by all these people with their own secret agendas.
Yeah. Talk about a recipe for disaster.
And that's exactly what it becomes. As Burr starts assembling this small army, gathering supplies, spreading rumors of his grand expedition, well, things are about to get a whole lot more complicated.
All right, so we've got Burr out there gathering men, supplies, all these whispers of a grand expedition. And of course, there's General Wilkinson still playing both sides. What happens next?
Well, this is where Wilkinson really shows his true colors.
Oh, how so?
He sends this coded letter to President Jefferson, warning him about Burr's plan, to capture New Orleans
Well, really?
and set up his own empire in the West.
So wait, the guy who's supposedly helping Burr is the one who rats him out.
Yeah, it's a pretty classic double cross. I think Wilkinson saw how risky Burr's plan was and decided to save his own skin.
Smart move.
By turning informant, he looks loyal to Jefferson.
Right.
It protects his own interests.
Yeah, but did Jefferson actually believe him? I mean, wouldn't he be a little suspicious of Wilkinson considering, Wilkinson's own shady dealings?
Well, Jefferson was hesitant at first, but Wilkinson's letter, it played right into his biggest fears. Western secession, the nation breaking apart.
Right, right.
And remember, Jefferson's own Louisiana Purchase had already caused a lot of controversy. People worried it would make the South too powerful, upset the whole balance of power.
So Burr basically handed his enemies the perfect weapon to use against him.
Exactly. And Jefferson, he didn't waste any time. He issued a proclamation denouncing Burr as a traitor, ordering his arrest.
Wow, the guy who almost became president is now public enemy number one.
I know, what a turn of events.
So what does Burr do?
Well, he tries to run, tries to escape down the Mississippi with his followers, hoping to reach Spanish territory, before the authorities catch up. It doesn't work. Federal troops, local militias, they close in on him. Burr's forced to surrender.
Man, what a downfall. So what happens to him?
He's put on trial for treason in Richmond, Virginia.
This wasn't just a trial about Burr, though, was it? I mean, it was a test of the whole legal system.
Yeah.
Could the young nation actually uphold the rule of law, even when facing a threat from within?
Absolutely. It was a huge deal. And the prosecution, led by Chief Justice John Marshall, they had a tough job ahead of them.
Yeah, they had to prove Burr's actions weren't just, ambitious scheming, right? They had to prove it was actual treason.
Which, the Constitution sets a very high bar for treason convictions.
That's got to be more than just thinking about rebellion. You need concrete evidence, right?
Yep.
Like actually waging war against the United States or helping its enemies.
Exactly. And despite Wilkinson's testimony, and there was a lot of circumstantial evidence, the prosecution just couldn't prove Burr's intentions beyond a reasonable doubt.
So what happened?
He was acquitted on all charges.
So he walked free.
He did. But his reputation was shattered. He was basically a man without a country, forever linked to this idea of treason.
Wow. So what did he do after that?
He ended up spending years in exile in Europe, trying to put his life back together. But the events of 1807, well, they changed everything for him. He eventually came back to New York, went back to practicing law, but he was never the same.
What a wild story. From war hero to vice president, almost president, and then this.
I know, right?
It really makes you think, what if he hadn't dueled Hamilton? Would things have turned out differently? For him, for the country.
It's the question that hangs over this whole story. The duel, it was a turning point, not just for Burr, but for American history. It robbed the nation of one of its founding fathers and sent another down a path of self-destruction.
Yeah, it shows how even in a nation built on democracy and reason, these personal rivalries, ambition, the desire for power, they can lead to really unexpected consequences.
And it leaves us with a question, I think. Was Aaron Burr a villain? A victim of circumstance, or, maybe a bit of both? What do you think?
That's a great question. And we'll leave that for our listeners to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. We'll see you next time.